My friend and I, along with 2 family members, made this school our shelter because we felt like our home was not as safe as it should be. And it ended up being a wise decision in the long run.
We knew that if it was anything more than what we were getting there, that the coast was going to be heavily damaged. Of course, we had no idea that the span of damage was going to be so wide.
And trees started falling. Never were really concerned about our lives or anything, but I was worried about other people. I had friends who were staying on the beach, really close to where the water was, so it was more about them and more about what was happening to the rest of the town.
About 30 minutes before the eye came through, somebody called the dispatch and said, "Come get me, the water's coming up to my ceiling and we're crawling up in the attic." And I asked the dispatch where the call came from, and when he told me, it's like, Jesus, that's 10 foot of water in Cedar Point. The whole Cedar Point's underwater. So that was the first indication of how bad it was going to be. And
when the water started coming in, I basically said, "We're in trouble, this is beach water." There were white caps coming down the street. We lived 3 blocks from the beach. We always understood that we were 28 feet above sea level here.
And as I was getting in the attic, I looked back and the water was just coming through my fireplace and all through my doors, and we heard this big boom. And Paul, my husband, turned around and he went back to see what it was, and the water was, it was so high, and I started screaming for him to come onto the attic. And when he finally did, he says the back door flew open, and I had to go put something to try to keep the water, the things from coming. He said, because it could be snakes, anything could come in, and I don't want that to come in the house. And when he got up in the attic, he said, "Florence, just watch the water." I said, "We're gonna die." He said, "No, you're not." I said, "Yes, we are." And he said, "No, you're not."
On August 29, 2005, one of the most devastating acts of Mother Nature hit the Gulf Coast region. Hurricane Katrina was the costliest and one of the 5 deadliest hurricanes in U.S. history. The storm killed 1,836 people, created $81.2 billion in damage, left many individuals homeless and unemployed, and changed lives forever. In the weeks and months following the storm, many individuals from across the United States donated resources to help the victims of the Gulf Coast region. Most support went to the victims of New Orleans. Even though the flooding waters devastated New Orleans, the majority of the destruction occurred where the hurricane eye actually took place over Mississippi. The hardest hit areas were communities such as Bay St. Louis and Waveland. These towns were completely destroyed beyond repair. Businesses, homes, and schools were razed, and the rebuilding process has been painfully slow. Upon my first visit a year after Katrina, I had the opportunity to tour the Gulf Coast region. The experience was one of amazement and anger. I never got the chance to see the true beauty of this area before the storm. So all I saw was despair and hardship on the lives of individuals who were determined to rebuild their lives and communities. This is what they told me.
So I got all my stuff and I put it on a table in case I had to make a dash for it. I was going to go to my neighbor who lives just a building away and climb onto his porch and whatever, you know. And about that time I heard something banging to the side of the building, and it was our pier. It was just like a big battering ram. It knocked the hole into the bottom of the building, and at that point water started gushing in the building. So then I started to get a little more worried. I'm thinking at that point how much damage is done to the building I'm going to have to repair. So I'm just kind of going all around the building looking for damage and just assessing everything. And all of a sudden, I go to the front door and open it up with a stairwell. I went down early that morning, and a big wave just came through and just It was the most horrible sound you ever wanted to hear. It just blew the stairwell out. Boom! And against the far wall there. And in other words, there's no walls left underneath the building now. The water's up about 8 feet and steady coming up. I mean, it's just coming up like this the whole time, you know. And so from 6:30 to 7:30, there's 8 feet of water and rising. And so at that point, I put my shoes on, opened up a window upstairs. There's a little lean-to roof. So I make one more attempt to look downstairs, and I looked in the store, and the water's about 12 feet because we're up. We had 10-foot ceilings downstairs. The building started to collapse, just a slow motion. As it did, the momentum took he and I off the side of the building into the water, which was the best thing that ever could have happened because, you know, if we would have stayed, I probably would have been pinned against the building. So I found a little ice chest lid, and when I hit the water, the first thing that hit my mind is how surreal it was because I couldn't hear anything. All I could see was this damage around me, you know, and then I was probably 10 feet, 11 feet in the water. And, you know, it's just the most horrible feeling in the world. So an ice chest lid floated by, and I grabbed him and put it on a lid, and I'm holding him like this, and the wind's taking us around this empty lot behind the house. And as it did, I looked back at that house that I was going to swim to, and it's starting to buckle and crumble. And as I got on the road, it just collapsed. And then I could see the city hall just being engulfed by water. Everything was right behind me, just crumbling. And the water was pushing me down the street. So I had no choice but to run into this. At that time, I got the little dog on my arm because the waves and the wind, he couldn't stay on the little tray anymore. Something told me to look behind me to make sure that I wasn't going to get decapitated by something, you know, behind me, swim out of the way of it. And as I looked around, you had to realize I'm in the water up to here with a little dog on my shoulder, and I looked around, and all I could see was water. And I looked up, and it was just like a big, huge wall coming at me, and it was probably, I'd say about 500 feet away. It just looked like water on top of water coming at me. And I thought we were going to drown. I said, well, this is it. And that wave finally caught up with us, and it sucked us under. And I could see, I guess I was probably from here to the top of this roof, from the top of the water, and I'm clawing for it, and can't get up, and I look over at the little dog, he's looking at me, I mean, we're underwater, and all of a sudden I just pop back up. So I'm close enough to where I can pull, I'm starting to paddle as hard as I can away from the storm, the current, and I'm paddling and paddling and paddling. I finally grabbed a limb, pulled myself another limb until I got out of the way of all the debris and just sat up in a tree for about 15 to 20 minutes and watched all that stuff go by. Once all the debris piled up, nothing left this way. Everything was gone. I could see. I could see the rooftops floating. So I just decided, I knew where I was because I could see, you know, actually you could see everything. It was pretty clear. So I just said, I'm going to let go and go across the railroad tracks. So I let go, just kind of meandered across the railroad tracks, got hung up in some more debris, and finally made my way to a house back there on the across the railroad tracks, you know, and not a scratch on me.
So early that morning we got up, and it was blowing really, really bad. Like my cousin and I, we walked on the porch, and we were standing on each side of the door, and the wind was so strong we could hardly breathe, you know. So my husband yelled, he said, y'all come in before the pressure build up and you won't be able to get back in the door. So we did, we came in and we're sitting, and I looked at Shirley and I said, I smell seawater. She said, seawater? I said, yeah. She said, you do? I said, yeah, I do. So we thought nothing of it. Telephone rang. My other son is in Texas. He was in Fort Hood. And he was on the phone. And he said, Ma, how is it? I said, oh, Blair, it's really getting bad now. I said, it's really bad. And he said, Ma, what you say? I said, it's bad. It's really bad. He said, Ma. He couldn't hear me anymore. So we got cut off. So we come back out, and Dwayne said, Ma, you got to see this. And I said, what? He said, come see. He said, I don't want to get everybody alarmed. He said, well, come see. So we go in the back room and look out the window, and the water between my home and the family home, I guess it's about 2 feet. And I'm thinking, boy, it's raining, but we never got water. I never associated it with the Gulf coming in. And I said, it's never gotten that high. I said, boy, it's really raining. It was. It was raining so hard. So I said, we need to see what's going on. So I got the little watchman, and I was trying to get it on a station. And my husband said, Henny, I'll do it. So he started, and all of a sudden we heard this wham! And I looked, water was just coming under the door. And I started screaming, because I just knew I lost my house. I knew it was going in, you know. So he said, stop her from acting, and come on, let's go get up in the loft. So my son ran, he said, we need sheets. I'm like, for what? He said, because we had the 3 grandbabies. They were like 6, 8, 6, and 5. He said, we're going to tie it and let them hold on to it so we won't lose them. So we're going down the hall to get up, and they had a dresser right under the attic door. So we stepped up on the dresser and we got up. And my husband said, we're going to need something in case we have to go higher to get up on the roof. So I said, the hammer's on the heat in the room. Well, at that time the water was, I guess, about waist deep in the house. And Dwayne said, swim to get it. And so he swam through the house, and sure enough, he came back with the hammer, and they loosened the boards up. So it was my 3 grandchildren, my son, his girlfriend, my cousin Shirley, and my husband and his nephew. Well, when we got up and got sort of situated, Limit, his nephew, was sitting and his feet was kind of hanging down, and I kept watching his foot. And the water was just, it wasn't raging anymore, it was just calmly rising. And all I could see, I couldn't see the overall view. I could just see the water coming up in the room below me. And I'm looking at Limwood's foot, and I'm saying, boy, when it gets above his feet, we're going to have to start moving. So I watched, and I had it just about timed. I knew when it should have been above his foot, but it wasn't. So I'm like, I think it's stopping.
Mile after mile of the coastline were ruined by a short period of a few hours. These few short hours will translate into years of rebuilding. I visited the region for a period of 4 times over the next year or so to see what progress took place. Each visit became even more frustrating since very little change took place. By this time, the rest of our country didn't hear about anything else in regards to Katrina. Now and again, some stories would focus on New Orleans and their rebuilding process, but little, if any, attention was given to Waveland or Bay St. Louis. As I traveled along the coast, I became more amazed each time I saw the vast destruction from the storm. Million-dollar homes were leveled to nothing more than a pile of bricks and wood beams. Communities and resorts that were once thriving are no longer here. Many residents who once had homes here decided to move elsewhere and rebuild their lives. The ones who were brave enough to return had to start from scratch, their lives, homes, and community. I admire them for their efforts and determination. But the people who I encountered had a different story to tell about their experience with Katrina, each one frustrated with the role of our government on the local, state, and national level. I would hear stories about how someone's home was completely destroyed by 20 feet of water in the home, and the insurance companies questioned whether or not this damage was a direct result from the storm. This continues today, and certainly will be an issue in the years ahead. When will these once vibrant and beautiful communities ever be returned to their previous glory? What have these residents learned about the storm that can prepare them for another potential storm? I had the opportunity to meet with the mayor of Bay St. Louis, one of the 2 locations that this documentary focuses on. I thought he could put things into perspective for me why progress is slow and what his role in the cleanup efforts.
15, 20 minutes after the center came through, we had 2 policemen who we had lost contact with. One, last we heard, had lost the roof on his house. The other one, whose wife was also a patrolman, had lost contact halfway through, and so they were concerned about them, and we said, let's go take care of them, check on them. There was about 6 or 8 calls that had come in right before the storm hit. Let's see what we can do to check on them. So 20 minutes after the eye passes, we're out on the roads, trying to get out on the roads from the station. Can't get very far. There's trees down and power lines down and wire and flooding in areas where we never anticipated any flooding. So we had to go back to the station, come up with another plan, and at that point we got some of the city equipment, the dump trucks, the backhoes, this type of thing, where we could at least get out from where we were. I was in a dump truck with the Public Works Director. We headed out Dunmore toward the highway to where the EOC was. Passed by there, saw they were okay. Hit the highway and started coming up the highway toward what was the bridge, and just saw devastation. I mean, just unimaginable. We'd see certain buildings that the whole building was gutted. There may be part of a shell left or a side wall, but almost everything just totally wiped out. The closer we got to the beach was even more so. At 2nd Street, nothing but a huge pile of debris with cars overturned underneath it, debris piled on top. I stopped and looked at where McDonald Realty was, and it took me what seemed like forever to realize that it wasn't just McDonald Realty's building was gone. The whole strip next to it was gone. All of the houses on the street behind it were gone, and everything in that entire triangle was gone. And I was actually looking across what was a fully developed neighborhood toward where the yacht club used to be, and had a perfect view of the bay from 2nd Street on Highway 90, looking across an area that was developed. And we got further up toward where Chapel Hill was at the foot of the bridge. All of the homes that had been built in there, beautiful homes. One had just been finished, a big 3-story building, nothing but slabs. Looked at the bridge and just totally laid over, nothing left. From that angle, we could see the railroad bridge, how it was wiped out. We could see what was left of the city pier, nothing left there. And then when we finally got down this way a little bit and had a different angle on the car bridge, realized that it wasn't just the top of it that was laid over, but some of the pilings and all were gone as well. And then we started hearing about and seeing where the water had come into certain areas that had never had it before. No way to get in or out, and nobody had any earthly idea what had happened over here in the Bay. And when I say the Bay, Hancock County, Bay St. Louis, Waveland, Hancock County as well. We were just simply isolated from the rest of the state and the rest of the country, I guess. You'd see pieces of other areas up and down the coast, Gulfport, Biloxi, a lot about New Orleans, but absolutely nothing about here. And this is where it is. People talk about ground zero. It's here. It's right here. So many people, with all of the publicity after the storm, so many people still really had no idea of how bad it really was. And I'm talking just individual people throughout the country, state and federal legislators. They'd see the coverage and say, well, that's bad, but they really couldn't comprehend the magnitude of it unless they were here. When the president came and when the governor came and when former President Bush came through and made the ride from Buccaneer Park along the beach up to Booker Street. It's just utter amazement. You could see the shock on their face that, they're 10 feet away from nothing but disaster. Empty lots, slabs, pilings, and that's all you see for miles and miles and miles. Somebody had said you could take a picture in one area and drive put that on your windshield and drive for 300 miles, and that's pretty much the same picture you're going to see all the way across. It's just so widespread. I don't know how to describe it, but a lot of people just really didn't comprehend how bad it was then. They look at it a year later and say, well, damn, it's still this bad, but we've come a long way, still have a long way to go. But if they really understood how bad it was to start with, I don't think they would be as critical that we're not any further along than what we are right now.
Oh, I have been impacted personally. My family life has suffered. I don't, I don't have any children, fortunately, I guess. I don't visit my mother, my sister very often. I don't get home on a regular time. My hours at work are, 12 hours, 15 hours some days when we've got other, major things going on. Career-wise, it's thrown me, it's actually catapulted me, so to speak, into becoming very politically oriented and knowing that I have to rely on senators, state senators, as well as U.S. senators to help us through some of these issues that we have. So in that respect, career-wise, I guess I'm more politically savvy. Personally, emotionally, it's difficult to stay in the area and wake up to this every day because you see the progress is so incremental and fighting for the money, trying to justify what we're doing, having people question us and trying to get things going. It's very frustrating. It's going to take, because of the code issues, and I think that's always an issue that you have to confront when you have a 1920s building or a historical building. We have no money to do that. FEMA does not recognize that as something that was directly impacted by the storm. So it's going to be up to us, meaning the district or local community, to put in the upgrades, the code requirements that need to be done before we can bring it back into a public facility. We can't open it to the public until we do that. It's been condemned by the building inspector. FEMA says, oh, it's only 20% damaged, and they're only calculating what was hit by flood waters. I have a second floor, windows were blown out, water came in, wind destroyed those classrooms, but FEMA did not recognize that as being impacted by the storm. Insurance, I think they've allowed $800,000, $900,000 for repairs. That's nowhere close. We need about $8 million to renovate the facility, whereas it would take a comparable space for 4th and 5th graders. We've got about 400 students, about $8 to $10 million. So do you bring this back up as a school? It's an old building. Class sizes are inconsistent, many issues with making a public school, or do we try to find the monies to rebuild? And we're just in a catch-22 with this building. We are not in the process of making any building plans until we get this piece resolved, because we don't want to patchwork our district or just Band-Aid it, because what we do to rebuild is going to be what we have for the next 20, 30, 40, 50, this is, 75 years.
I don't think that it will ever be the same in my lifetime. I don't think it'll ever be the same again. Not completely the same. I think we'll go back, we'll get into a certain feeling of normalcy because it's going to be the new normal. We need a new normal. The old normal will never be here again, so we need to create some type of feeling of, in a sense of community continuity. I think we will forever think of things as pre-Katrina and post-Katrina. There's never going to be, 10 years ago, it's always going to be before Katrina. I don't think this place will ever be the way it was before. Do I think it can be good? I think it can be excellent. I think it can be better than it ever has been before, but it will never have the little small community nuances and I don't know, the little vignettes in the downtown areas and so forth. I don't think that'll ever come back the way it was.
I not only wanted to hear about people's experiences during the storm, but what has life been like for them the years afterwards. Aid and relief has been slow, but lives move on. There were many people who I interviewed that didn't want their story told on camera. It was too emotional to relive this event on camera. However, each and every person did talk about government's overall role during the rebuilding process. No one in particular was to blame, since the blame and finger-pointing was passed around on each governmental level. Why can't our government take care of us? This was our war here. People were homeless, hurt, and abused by our system. From the few I did interview about the government's response, it was interesting to hear their stories and opinions. The role of government and FEMA always came up in conversation. The government and FEMA have failed them. Even 4 years after the storm, some families were still living in FEMA trailers. 4 years of waiting for a failed system to assist them. The stories were endless. I felt useless, but hopefully the government will listen to what these communities have to say about the cleanup effort.
That it has not been great, because look at our building sitting over there. It's still sitting there, waiting to be torn down, you know, and get us a new building, get children back here. So I feel like they have failed us. That's my opinion, that they have failed us. And we need them to realize that we are not asking for something that we don't deserve. We deserve to have a good life for our children, to continue to raise our families, and we have to do it through them. They have to help us to get back where we used to be, and better. We want to get better. We have gotten a lot of, we've gotten some monies, but we still need a lot more. We don't want people to forget about us. We're still here, and we're still trying to make this a better place to live.
The federal government, you got to break it apart in different sections. When you say federal government, you're talking about FEMA. Is an organization that tried to come in and help us. I don't think they were ever experienced in handling the type of crisis that we have here. You go off and you fight it on foreign soil, so when you fight it right on your own homelands to the type of degree that we have, I don't think they ever expected, nor have they ever was prepared to handle such a catastrophe as we had. Our local government, on the other hand, our governor here and stuff, has taken action really to help us. I think they've done a lot more for local communities and stuff here. And things are still coming. The grant money, the grants for rebuilding the cities are starting to happen. And I think it's because of our involvement with the congressmen that are here as well, fighting for us up there. But I don't think the higher-ups that are not, they just don't know. They didn't come down here. There was a few of them came. They tried to take the message back up there and tell them what they saw. But as you know, since you're here, you've got to see it to believe it.
It's interesting. I mean, when you lose all communication, when you lose all access, you know, how primitive things become, and how valuable food and water is. And at the end of the day, I think, you know, as much as FEMA has helped over the long haul, it just, you can't rely on anybody. The government, you just have to have a plan in place and not expect help. Because it may not come, it may come from churches, which that's the first people we saw really, was other people, individuals and nonprofits. They showed up first before anybody.
But the federal government kind of dropped the ball, and where they did, faith-based groups are the ones that helped us. I'm telling you, if it wasn't for them, I don't know what we would have done. For food and all, the federal government didn't set up, we had nothing. They didn't set up places to eat. It was just all these groups came down here to help us, you know. The outpouring of love was, you wouldn't believe it, you know, it kind of restored your faith in your fellow man. But as far as the federal government, they concentrated on Louisiana, you know. People just don't realize how bad it is, you know. When you watch the news and you see this kind of devastation on it, and you go, oh, well, they'll be all right. Well, we will be all right, but it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort.
Disaster. One word, expense.
Wasteful.
Like we talked before about a hyphenated two-letter word.
Archaic.
Disorganized.
Rip off. I'm sorry.
Ineffective.
One word. I'm only allowed one word? Okay. FEMA. Well, I guess the first word that came to mind I can't say in public, but it would probably be dilemma.